Hello AP students, this is Mrs. Politsky and I have notes for chapter 14 and we're going to talk a little bit about conformity and groupthink. So let's talk about conformity. Conformity is the tendency for people to mimic other people. Sometimes it's called a chameleon effect. And one of the most famous studies on conformity was something known as the Asch effect. This goes back to a man named Solomon Asch that you see up here. And in his study, male college students were told that they would be participating in a visual perception study. And they were shown cards with 3 lines that you see very similarly right here. And they were to indicate which of the 3 lines was of the same length. So they would compare letter A to numbers 1, 2, or 3. This seemed like a very simple problem, and it would be pretty rare to make any kind of mistakes. When those same individuals were put into a group that had been coached to give the wrong answers, everything would change. So in Solomon's study, what would happen is in the first 3 trials, everyone agreed on the correct answer. But as we enter the next trial, the first person would respond basically in a way that was obviously incorrect. So, for example, they might look at letter A and say it was number 1. Okay, and obviously you could see that they were clearly different or unequal. And so did the next person, and so on until pretty much everyone in that room, except for the individual who was kind of the subject, was the last person remaining. And everyone had unanimously agreed on the erroneous judgment. That subject, for the most part, had to decide whether to go along with everyone else in the situation, okay, and conform, or to remain independent by standing by their objective evidence of their own eyes. Nearly everyone showed signs of disbelief and some discomfort when they were faced with a majority who saw the world so differently than they did. Group pressure usually prevailed. This is kind of known as the Asch effect. This is a form of conformity in which the group majority influences an individual's judgment. Conformity is kind of that tendency for people to adopt the behaviors and attitudes and opinions of a group. Heroes are usually people who are able to resist situational forces that overwhelm their peers and remain true to their personal values. They are sometimes the whistleblowers who challenge corrupt or immoral systems by not going along with maybe a company's norms. Heroes are often despised by their former colleagues and are made to pay a high price for not being silent as a team player. Group characteristics that produce conformity. Asch basically identified 3 factors that influence whether a person will yield to group pressure. First would be the size of the majority. If there are quite a few people, then chances are you're probably going to go along with them. The presence of a partner who dissented from the majority. So as Asch conducted these experiments, sometimes he would have more than one subject, and maybe there would be 2 individuals that would together not go along with the majority. Again, the size of the discrepancy between the correct answer and the majority's position. So, you know, if you would pick line number 1 here and compare it to letter A, that's kind of an obvious, and so that might make it easier to, you know, to maybe stand on your own and be independent. But let's say if it was line 3, maybe not so much, because the discrepancy is smaller. Asch found that individuals tend to conform with a unanimous majority of a few as perhaps 3 people, but not if they were faced with only 1 or 2. Given the person, one ally who dissents from the majority, sharply reduced the conformity. All who yielded underestimated the influence of social pressure and the frequency of their conformity. A person who is more likely to to conform under certain circumstances, when the judgment is difficult or ambiguous, when the group members are perceived as especially competent, meaning that they might be experts, when the responses are given publicly rather than privately, so everyone hears maybe where certain people stand rather than maybe putting it on like a ballot or submitting it in kind of as like a survey response where no one would see. When the group majority is unanimous, but once the unanimity is broken, the rate of conformity does drop. To vote openly in a group, you will probably conform to the group majority for the following reasons. If the issue being decided is complex or confusing, meaning that you're not really sure about the issue, maybe you're uninformed. If others in the group seem to know what they are talking about, you must vote by raising your hand instead of casting a unanimous or anonymous, I should say, ballot. So if it's made public, you're probably going to go along with the group. When the entire group casting their votes before you all vote the same way, and if the leader votes first and does so in a way that is somewhat public. Groupthink. We talked a little bit about groupthink in sociology, but this is an importance of social psychologists as a process that encourages conformity in thinking and decision-making of individuals when the groups, such as committees, are termed groupthink. And this goes back to a psychologist named Irving Janis. And in groupthink, members of the group attempt to conform their opinions to what each believes to be the consensus of the group. This conformity bias leads the group to take actions that each member might normally consider unwise. 7 conditions promote groupthink. 1, the isolation of the group. High group cohesiveness, meaning that everybody in the group is kind of the same background, maybe the same age, maybe of the same educational standards, economic standards. Directive leadership, meaning that it's kind of I want to say, very authoritarian. The lack of norms requiring a methodical procedure, meaning that you're not following a strict agenda, you may not be following the protocol of how things are to be done. Homogeneity of the members' social background and ideologies, so are they all conservative, are they all of the same maybe religious makeup? And then high stress from external threats with low hope of a better situation than that of the group leader. This concept was first developed to help understand the bad decisions that were being made by the U.S. government regarding the bombing of Pearl Harbor, the Vietnam War, and the invasion of Cuba's Bay of Pigs. Groupthink was a factor that contributed to faulty decisions in the space shuttle disasters. So if you go back to 1986 with the Space Shuttle Challenger, or if you look back to 2003 with decisions about trying to land Space Shuttle Columbia, groupthink was a factor in those kind of poor decisions. The bankruptcy of Enron, which was kind of an oil company out of Texas about a decade or so ago. And more recently, the 2003 decision to wage war against Iraq. Groupthink is basically examining few alternatives, selecting and gathering information, pressure to conform within a group, or to withhold criticism and collective rationalization. Thank you very much.